I tell you one thing, we are far from ignorant people.
They sold perfection on posters, but the truth rode under rhinestones, stitched into scars, hidden by hats, gloves, and bright lights that never told the whole story. Tonight we're opening the stage door, stepping past the smoke and the smiles, and walking straight into the rooms where legends learned how to sing around pain, disguise the shake in a hand, and turn private battles into public myth. These are the stories country music kept tidy for the cameras and messy everywhere else, the kind of secrets the echo in an empty arena keeps long after the crew rolls the cables. You'll hear the grit in familiar voices, the little pauses fans chalked up to style, the tricks that made pain look like pose. And somewhere in these lives you may find your own reflection, because anyone who's ever shown up on a hard day already knows how a song can be both a mask and a mirror. Johnny Cash wasn't just the man in black. He was the man with a jaw that never healed the way it should, and nerves that fired like bad wiring. A surgery gone wrong left him chewing carefully and smiling on one side, while later years brought a creeping numbness that traded feeling for fire in his hands and feet. He learned to live with it the same way he learned to fight everything else, by outworking pain, leaning into the microphone and building a sound so big the hurt had to stand in the back. The camera caught a myth. The records captured a man who used rhythm as a cane and willpower as a tour bus, pushing city to city until the ache learned his schedule. Hank Williams entered the world with a secret knot in his spine and spent the rest of his short life trying to outsing it. Spina bifida occulta isn't something you notice in a glamour shot, but it announces itself every time a back seizes at dawn or a bus seat turns into a vice. That lonesome sound people still chase didn't just come from heartbreak. It came from a man measuring each step on stage because one wrong twist could set his whole body ringing. His hat and smile did the talking while the pain parked itself behind the curtain, waiting for the applause to fade. He turned a crooked start into straight honesty, mailing the future a stack of songs that refused to die. Waylon Jennings carried a bluesy growl that could bulldoze a room, but diabetes stalked him for decades until it took pieces he could never get back. The guitar stayed loud, the lights stayed hot, the crowds stayed hungry. Backstage was different. Bandmates learned the way he shifted weight to guard the foot he would eventually lose, how he saved energy for the 2 minutes that mattered. The downbeat and the stare that said he'd win the next 3 minutes, too. He didn't show pain, he dared it to keep up. Even when the halls grew longer and the doctor's calendars busier, he kept finding the groove where the body remembers joy better than discomfort. Patsy Cline wore her scar like a secret. A car crash carved a line across her forehead years before a plane carved a line across history, and makeup artists learned the exact angle of powder and light that turned bad luck into mystery. She sang like satin sliding over steel, and if you ever wondered how her voice carried that ache so cleanly, remember, the woman knew what it meant to walk back into a studio with bruises fading and cameras waiting. Her power never apologized for the stitches underneath. It smiled, it soared, and then it broke your heart with a note that sounded like a window opening while rain still fell outside. Loretta Lynn didn't take days off from being Loretta. She hauled songs and family and an empire through decades of rehearsals, buses, and halls that test backs for a living. Long before the world counted hospital stays and headlines, she was already making bargains with pain. Stand one more hour, sing one more chorus, laugh one more time for the folks who came to see the girl from Butcher Holler win again. There were whispers about a crooked spine and the kind of nagging ache that follows you into sleep. Maybe that's true, maybe it's myth, but anyone who's watched her conquer a stage knows the body doesn't move like that without paying a bill. Mel Tillis turned a lifelong stutter into a master class in alchemy. Talking tightened, singing freed, and somewhere in that switch a miracle lived. On stage, he let the melody carry what the mouth wanted to hold, and the result felt like watching a locked door fall open. Audiences leaned toward the punchlines, then stood up for the choruses, sensing instinctively that every fluid phrase had been earned twice, once in rehearsal, once in bravery. He didn't hide the tremble. He taught it harmony. Every song became proof that a barrier can be a hinge if you learn where to push. Glen Campbell's smile said California sunshine. His set lists said something else entirely. He walked into the hardest chapter of his life with a camera rolling, letting the world see what most families only whisper about at kitchen tables. Memory thinned, words slipped, and 1,000 little lights began blinking out one by one, but the old craft kept sparking. He'd turn to the band, catch a cue, and ride muscle memory like a familiar highway. The courage it took to tour when names went missing can't be measured on a chart. It lives instead in the kindness of a crowd that sings the lyric back to you and turns the fog into a kind of shelter. Dolly Parton's hands tell a different story if you catch them between the sequins. Offstage, there have been gloves, sometimes lacy, sometimes snug, always part of the Dolly language, and everyone from stylists to gossipers has built a theory around them. Scars, tattoos, compression, vanity. Maybe all, maybe none, maybe just a woman deciding what the camera gets to see. She turned practicality into pageantry, and if those gloves hid anything, it was simply the idea that she owed anyone an explanation for choosing where to sparkle. The bigger truth is that she kept working when lesser storms would have chased others home. Charlie Pride kept his private battles private. Years after becoming the first black superstar of mainstream country, he found himself facing a threat to the instrument that built his American dream. Throat treatments and doctor visits don't look like heroics, but they demanded the same grit as long miles and long odds. He went to work anyway, minding the voice like a priceless guitar, tuning, resting, and refusing to let fear set the key. When he grinned and dropped into "Kiss an Angel Good Mornin'," you could feel the whole room tilt toward joy, never seeing the regimen behind that sound. Jessi Colter has always sounded like a desert night. Soft air, vast space, and a hint of danger. People who grew up around her talk about the unusual poise in her posture, a stance learned young and held for life. Whether that came from a crooked back or a strict spine of stubbornness barely matters on tape. The microphone heard the lift and the length, the way each note seemed to float over a body that knew how to carry weight without letting it bend her voice. She made presence a kind of medicine, and the room took it gladly. Tammy Wynette didn't just stand by her man, she stood through surgeries, hospital halls, and the kind of pain that makes night feel like a week. The number doesn't matter. Dozens is enough to tell the story. What matters is that she kept returning to the booth and the bus, wrapping painkillers in lipstick and showing up polished when her insides felt like glass. If her songs sounded like they were built from the bones of real trouble, that's because they were. She turned vulnerability into architecture and invited the world to walk through it. Roy Acuff knew how to outfox age. When ears tired and eyes dimmed, he leaned into craft, tempos a hair slower, intros a beat longer, banter shaped to buy breath and focus. He made adjustments the way a veteran pitcher widens the plate. Nobody in the balcony noticed. They were too busy grinning at the king doing what the king does. Strength isn't always a high note. Sometimes it's knowing where to put the mic stand so you can make the last chorus hit like the first. He guarded the crown by guarding the show. Conway Twitty's photos got smoother as the years went on, hair higher, suits sharper, angles kinder. Every camera operator has a favorite side, and if you pay attention, you'll find Conway had one too. Maybe it was vanity, maybe it was nerves that didn't always behave. Maybe it was the natural tilt of a man who'd earned the right to choose his light. Whatever it was, the Polish was never the point. The point was that voice, a silk threat that made radio dials move on their own. If he protected the look a little, it was only to keep the sound front and center. Buck Owens brought a red, white, and blue grin to a life that wasn't always easy on the body. Years on the road sandpaper a soul and a stomach, and he had his share of hospital bracelets to prove it. He learned when to rest and when to roar, how to let the band carry the weight when the throat asked for mercy, and how to come back swinging when the crowd needed the punch. If the scale and the mirror told different stories from tour to tour, he just tuned the Telecaster and wrote a better ending each night. That's honky-tonk pragmatism disguised as charm. Barbara Mandrell survived a wreck that would have ended most careers, then carried the cost for years. Bones mended, the brain took longer. That's the part fans didn't always see, the way memory flickers after a concussion, the way stairs look taller when the leg aches in damp weather, the way fatigue steals the afternoon even when the headlines say you're fine. She fought back with discipline and grace, rehearsing the same steps until her body trusted them again, and when she smiled on stage, it wasn't pretending, it was victory, tidy enough to wear heels. Porter Wagoner wore rhinestones like armor. No one noticed the way a sleeve could hide more than skin, or how a shoulder seam can trick an eye. The suits dazzled, the smile gleamed, and the show went on even when the frame underneath didn't feel like cooperating. Style wasn't a costume for Porter, it was strategy. He understood that if the jacket was loud enough, the aches would have to raise their voice to be heard, and he never let them win that fight in public. He taught half the town how to turn sparkle into shelter. June Carter Cash knew pain long before hospitals began to know her name. Years of picking, traveling, and mothering set their own kind of toll in motion. She shrugged it off the way mothers and road warriors do, move the gear, fix the harmony, add one more stop to the day. When she finally faced surgery, she didn't come back. But the story worth telling is the one before that ending, the years she kept a family moving and an empire humming while her own engine coughed quietly in the background. Steady is a kind of bravery, and she had it to spare. Minnie Pearl turned a straw hat and a price tag into a cultural touchstone, but the last chapter of her life wasn't written in punchlines. A stroke stole what the stage had given her: timing, balance, the quicksilver dance of setup and payoff. She left the spotlight gracefully, letting the character rest while the woman underneath fought to reclaim simple daily victories. If you ever laughed at one of her jokes, you helped build the courage she needed when the body said no more. Her legacy kept smiling while she healed in quiet rooms. Boxcar Willie lived in a costume that told the truth. The hobo suit, the loosened stance, the slow walk. It all looked like theater until you learned about the years of Air Force service and the miles those joints logged before they ever stepped onto a country stage. Some nights the limp showed, some nights it didn't. Most nights the voice carried the freight and the feet did what they could. The act was bigger than a hitch in a stride, and the audience came for the heart beating inside the rags. He turned weariness into welcome. Tom T. Hall wrote about small mercies and hard days because he knew both well enough to trust them. Behind the storyteller's wink was a man acquainted with gray weather. When his road ended, headlines used tidy words and let the darker sentence stay between the lines. What matters for our song is that he wrote a map for anyone who's ever felt the afternoon get heavy. The kind of map that points to a coffee cup, a joke told right on time, a dog in the yard, a light left on for you. He knew that tenderness is a muscle. Freddy Fender's voice felt like sunshine through blinds, warm and a little sad, but the body carrying it lived in a clinic more than any star should. Diabetes, hepatitis, a kidney from his daughter, a liver saved by strangers. He kept climbing onto stages with fresh stitches and a calendar full of checkups, choosing applause over excuses again and again. If he sounded tired sometimes, that was honesty, not weakness. And when he soared, it was a man out singing lab results. He taught hope to dance with fatigue and let the audience lead. Charlie Pride, Dolly Parton, Glen Campbell, Mel Tillis, Waylon Jennings, Patsy Cline. Different decades, different battles, same decision. Keep going. Roy Acuff kept the crown even as time tapped his shoulder. Barbara Mandrell learned to trust her reflexes again. Porter Wagoner put on another suit. Boxcar Willie tuned the guitar and took one careful step after another. June Carter steadied everyone around her, the way anchors do. Hank Williams leaned into the ache and mailed letters to the future with every chorus. Johnny Cash pressed pain into the groove until it sounded like prayer. You might be wondering which one hid it under a cowboy hat. Here's a better question. How many problems have you hidden under a smile? Country music has always been honest about everything except the details that make the honesty possible. The bruise under the makeup, the glove over the scar, the chair just off camera that holds a hero between takes. If you feel a little braver hearing this, that's because these folks were braver than the posters ever told you. They weren't bulletproof, they were relentless. And the deformities? The word sounds harsh until you remember how art works. A crooked spine teaches a straight line how to mean something. A rebuilt jaw changes a vowel into a new color. A stutter teaches timing the way no class can. A scar steals symmetry and gives back a story. In a town obsessed with polish, the rough edges made the records last longer. You hear it every time a chorus hits with a little extra grit, every time a line lands with more weight than the rhyme can explain. The truth is that country music was never just Saturday night neon or Sunday morning forgiveness. It was also Tuesday afternoon physical therapy, long sleeves in July, careful lighting, and friends who knew which side to shoot. It was coaches teaching new ways to breathe, spouses tying shoes for hands that didn't always listen, and bandmates who learned to read a glance that said, "Buy me 4 bars." Strength wasn't a bicep, it was choreography. How to place the pain backstage while the song takes the bow. So when the old footage rolls and you catch a glance you never noticed, a hand hovering near a chair, a face angled just so, a smile that holds a shadow, understand you're not seeing weakness peeking through. You're seeing craftsmanship at its most human. You're seeing the price paid for the soundtrack that kept 1,000 little towns company through breakups and barn dances, first jobs and last goodbyes. You're seeing what it takes to be more than famous. You're seeing what it costs to be remembered. The next time a chorus gives you goosebumps, imagine the rehearsal you'll never see. The stretch before the show, the pill bottle sitting like a metronome on the dressing table, the prayer whispered under the roar, the quick joke in the wings that unties a knot of fear. Picture Dolly adjusting a glove before a handshake and smiling like it's part of the show. Picture Waylon shifting his stance before the lights come up. Picture Tammy pressing a palm to her middle, counting to 5, then stepping out anyway. These little acts of courage are the bridges between verses, the reason the payoff lands. These weren't flawless people, they were stubborn hearts with microphones. They turned limitations into signatures and hid hurt in plain sight until the music made it beautiful. If that isn't country, nothing is. And if hearing their hidden battles changes the way you hear their hits, good. It should. The mask isn't the lie. It's just the tool they use to keep the work alive. The truth is, the song that made you pull over once and breathe for a second before heading home. The truth is that pain kept time like a drummer and the rest of the band learned to swing with it. Some secrets should have been obvious. The hat worn low, the hand kept busy, the chair parked off to the side like part of the set. But the best magic always hides in daylight. What matters is that they found a way. They found it on buses and backlots, in clinics and hotel rooms, in quiet moments when nobody was asking for a selfie, and in loud moments when everyone was. The legacy isn't the injury, the diagnosis, or the rumor. The legacy is the work. It's the sound that got us through and still does. So here's to the scar you never noticed and the glove you thought was fashion. Here's to the posture that learned to carry a crooked day. Here's to the laughter that covered a tremor, the ballad that covered a limp, the encore that covered the truth and told it at the same time. And here's to you, listening a little closer now. If you hear courage under the chorus, you're hearing the real song. If you feel your own shoulders ease a little, you're part of the band. Like, leave a thought and subscribe if you want more stories that play the truth in tune. And if you are here with me at the end, consider this your backstage pass. Share the legend you learned. Tell me whose story shocked you most and keep listening for the hidden metronome. The beat you cannot see is the one they followed, and the one we all borrow every time life gets truly loud.